Absolutely. And I think that's a really good transition into dissecting a little bit of your career journey. How has networking been important throughout your career?
I would say that I didn't realize that I was in sales even when I was at Marquette and working for the Phonathon until I ended up at a sales role. Like, my background was to go to law school and to explore that journey. And it came to the end of my Marquette career and I just could not go to school anymore. I've just always been a worker. I had 3 jobs when I was in college. I just love working. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, I can always go back. I will go back. Well, here we are, but which is okay. Yeah, I think I grew up in a super small town and it was doctor, lawyer, teacher, dentist, right? Like, you're pretty standard jobs. And I don't think anyone would have explained to me that sales outside of a car salesman existed. And so once I landed that role at the Journal Sentinel, it was less about external marketing and networking and more about internal. So that was really where I honed my skills on how to make the right connections internally, how to leave a good impression, how to be a good worker, how to be open to learning. Like, the internal networking at the Journal was really where I found my footing. And that, I think, prepared me for the outside of the job networking, and was always happy to take customers and clients to events and stuff like that. So it was more one-on-one when it was sort of outside of the organization when it came to networking. But when I thought back on it, because I was I really didn't get into quote networking, especially for outside events, more till I got till Summerfest. But what I didn't realize when I was thinking through this question to prep was I did so much internal networking. Some of my best friends to this day came from the Journal. And the reason I'm at Summerfest is because my boss, when I worked for the Journal for my last 5 years there, he moved over to Summerfest. And when he was sort of creating and shifting the sales team and the sales structure that fit his vision, there was a position for me there, or there was a position, and he specifically asked me to interview for it and to fill that. So had I not made that internal connection, and I think that's just as important when you're kind of thinking about my next career path, especially if you're staying within the Milwaukee area. I think it's important to really recognize that the relationships and the work you do inside the 4 walls and the networking there, it might not feel like networking, but it's just as important as kind of maybe what you do outside of it too. And so that was really where I kind of honed those skills, learned how to make relationships, learned how to make those business and work relationships too. And so that was super important. And I always joke that I was at Hearst Channel 12 just long enough to make some awesome friends and make some good connections, because it was only about 9 months, just shy of a year. And same thing though, that was I think it was that right stepping stone. I hate to leave. Clearly I was at the Journal for 8 years and I've been at Summerfest for 7 now, but I'm a lifer usually when it comes to a job situation. But that sort of, I would guess you could call it a blip within the broadcast space, introduced me to a whole different strategy of advertising. It was a whole different way of thinking about how to market a company's business. I learned enough to sort of gain some new skills as well as some really great new connections. And it was, again, just sort of long enough, because then when I actually came over to Summerfest, I worked with Channel 12 and I do work with Channel 12 and Menards as one of my sponsors. So it created that bridge actually, and that relationship that carried me over. And that is sort of what will happen in Milwaukee. And you kind of see that. And I always say, if someone is planning to stay in Milwaukee, getting out and networking and making those connections is so important, because you can never have enough people saying great things about you. That's just, there's nothing that beats that, because it's very obvious when someone truly is behind, the scenes advocating for you. And you can tell when those conversations are happening, because you run into someone who's like, oh yeah, so-and-so, told me that they work with you. And it's usually in a positive light. So I think that sort of internal networking at the Journal transitioned me over to be able to do that at Hearst really well. But then when I came here is really, I think, per Sarah, our now CEO and president's encouraging, is, Summerfest is a community brand. we need to be out in the community where it makes sense and where appropriate. And so there was always a high encouragement to get involved, which is why I joined Project Lead, which is ultimately how I got to Made a House, which is then just sort of, steamrolled my excitement around doing things outside of the organization, but representing the organization. And I would say that's probably transitioned even now to representing the organization and me. I think that for the longest time, all the networking choices I made were, well, I should do this because it'd be great to have a Summerfest or Summerfest Tech representative there. And now it'd be great because I want to be there too. And I want to continue to, meet more people in this ecosystem and go from there.
Well, networking certainly, it allows people to make like professional connections, but it also opens doors to new opportunities to build new skills, to meet new people who are going to open further doors. And no matter how long you are in a role, especially as you're just starting your career, there's no wrong things to learn. Like you need to be in different industries. You need to be doing different types of things, building different skills. And that's how you create a well-rounded career experience. Like if you're in one place doing one thing for, too long, like you're not fielding all the different types of things. And I don't know about you, but I need to be doing different things every day in order to feel not only productive, but like I'm growing.
Yeah.
That really feeds a lot into like my personal and professional growth and development is being in different spaces, working with different people, learning from them, hopefully teaching them some things and kind of growing and developing in that way. And all of that starts internally as well as externally.
Absolutely. And I think I always say you can always learn something from every situation you're in. And so it's often why, my calendar is so full is because I don't say no to a lot because it's so hard to walk away from what could I have met or who could I have met or what could I have done had I attended this event? And because I've also seen that come to fruition. I think the Wisconsin Tech Council's entrepreneurship conference steering committee, which is a bit of a mouthful, but as is the tech ecosystem, but I was I was flattered, but also slightly confused because I don't run our own pitch competition. We work with a partner to do that. My support of entrepreneurs is as a fangirl, right? Like I could never be one. So I always want to like lift up and represent those who are putting it all on the line and creating their own companies and businesses. And so what I found though, is that I could provide insight into like the event planning side of it and the structure and the judging, because I had access to all those things with our own pitch competition. But then also what I learned was, there were a couple of lawyers, a couple of universities, a couple of other accelerators and stuff on that committee. I learned so much more about the entrepreneur ecosystem just from that one committee where I think we met 4 times, but it opened up my eyes a little bit more on content, a little bit more on what they're looking for, where the gaps are for them right now. Is it funding? Is it first customer? Those kinds of things, which I maybe would have just kind of kept going along without recognizing, without having said yes to joining that steering committee. So I think it's important to recognize the skills you're bringing to the networking piece, but also being open to like learning more is just as important. Like they sort of have to, like you were saying, almost meet in the middle to do both. Otherwise, sometimes you can walk away being like, I don't know if this was, that valuable.
No, absolutely. Especially as a first generation professional, which you are, and which we love at FGPM. And a very successful one, might I add. This past year, you were awarded a 40 under 40 award from the Milwaukee Business Journal. We love that.
Yes, I was so excited.
Incredible accomplishment. Super, super awesome. What is the best piece of advice that you could give your younger self upon first beginning your career?
I really, really had to think about this one because I think some of the initial cliche responses come first to mind, but I really wanted to think about what have I continued to do in my career that I did when I was first starting out and when I was younger that I didn't realize was going to be so valuable. And it was almost more so not something to change, but something to not let go of, something I did. And so my thought process through this was don't underestimate working hard. and leaving a good impression. So those were sort of the two things that I came up with. Like I said, I have been a hard worker my whole life, started a job when I was 14, always had multiple. I just always really liked working. And I think that hard work ethic, and it's not working yourself to the bone, but it's saying yes to things outside of your, dedicated responsibilities. It's wanting to learn more about the business you're working in, like asking the whys, not in a confrontational way, but in a, I want to better understand this so that I can sort of take that learnings, digest it, and then expand my business acumen. Like that working hard is not necessarily at your computer 9 hours plus a day to the bone, but it's getting more involved in things that, again, maybe are outside of your dedicated responsibilities or purview. And I think that gets recognized. And I think when you say yes and you show up and you volunteer for things, it makes a difference in how the skills that you learn. So I think it expands those naturally, but also how you're represented with those around you, like your coworkers, your bosses, that kind of thing. And so that was for me a huge piece. Like, you're working hard, and don't underestimate the value that that's going to bring you. Like, keep working hard and lean into that. Don't necessarily lean away from it. And the leaving a good impression, I think we have talked about this before, but Milwaukee is a big city, but it is small, right? So the leaving a good impression, even if it's for a moment, matters. And I think that was sort of a learning, even potentially in a constructive criticism way to myself, where it was like, yes, you have this natural bubbly personality, but be more aware of the people you're talking to and their responses to you when you're talking, because I think that you may think that you are leaving a good impression when maybe sometimes you're leaving the impression of interrupting or talking over people or not listening. And so I think the good impression is that you didn't leave necessarily a bad impression, but I think it's just being more hyper aware of the conversations you're having. And that comes with just like growth and learning, but also leaving a really good impression can go so far. So just don't underestimate that either, and try to show up with your best self as much as you can, especially when you are networking and meeting people for the first time, because I think that just that one interaction with you, they may not have another one for a year, 2 years, 6 years, but when they do, you want them to remember the positive things about you. And so those were kind of the two biggest takeaways that I wanted to kind of give to my younger self, and just to kind of lean into those things and not shy away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. I think there's a lot to be said about intellectual curiosity, especially in the workplace. Like, I totally agree with what you said, is you don't have to be at your computer for 10 hours a day if that's not what it's expected of you, just to feel like you're going above and beyond with your time. You can still be curious and dedicating your time and energy to something by just asking for 10 minutes of someone's time after a meeting. Hey, I like how you explained this, or hey, you mentioned this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how it ties into our business model, our industry, etc.?
Yeah.
And that's how you learn. And speaking of a good impression, that person is going to hear you being intellectually curious. And related to that, and something you just touched on, is like not waiting for your turn to speak. I tell this to my mentees all the time, like, don't wait for your turn to speak. Truly listen to what someone is saying, because that's not only how you learn, it is how you create a really good first impression with someone, especially in like a networking and in a networking environment as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something I had to learn, especially in meetings. And I found something that really helps me is to write down the topic or question I want to bring up. And if it still feels relevant, and if it still feels like the answer wasn't presented and it is important enough to address to the whole group, which is another thing too. Like, sometimes these questions can be one-on-one or offline. If it still feels valuable, then yes, bring it up. But I found that sometimes I was bringing stuff up, or I was interjecting a comment for no other reason than to like participate. And that sometimes isn't like the most productive. And so that is something that I learned, where when you're looking at leaving a good impression, it's across everything. It's a small internal meeting of 3 people to a room where you're doing a welcome to 3,000, like, and everything in between. It's just kind of learning from those little skills, and again, not waiting for your turn, but to really internalize and like, will this question or comment bring value? And that's how you want to show up, more so than, oh, I spoke up for no other reason than to maybe like even change the flow of the meeting. So that's, yeah, definitely something I had to learn as well.
Yeah, participation is not a checkbox. It should
Right.
be productive, because you run the risk of leaving a negative impression of just like, oh, this person just wanted to say something and
Yep.
wasn't necessarily where the vibe was going or anything like that.
Vibe checks, important.
Very important, very important. So one thing I definitely want to make sure that we talk about is our beloved Marquette Mentors program. You and I both dedicate our time to the Marquette Mentors program at the Marquette University.
Yeah.
What does mentorship mean to you?
So mentorship to me is not necessarily something that I really had. So this program was not around when I was in school. As I looked through a formal mentorship, in the back of my mind, as I went through like my career and even like high school and stuff like that, like I didn't necessarily have that formal mentor. That's not to say I didn't have guidance and I didn't have what sort of was a form of mentorship, but it just wasn't structured. And I think just knowing my personality and knowing how much I really love structure around things, I think I would have really like had a lot of additional success had I maybe had a formal mentor early on. And it's just something that, because I didn't necessarily have that, I wanted to be able to provide back, even if it was just as a resource. So I've had 3 mentees now. One has sort of, we would meet, but she just wasn't as engaged, which is totally fine. The one this year, super engaged. We met twice a month, came prepared with questions, etc. And then there was sort of a mentee in the middle, which is, none of them are good or bad, but it definitely has shown me the gamut already in 3 years of how a mentee can engage with a mentor. But what I appreciated is that no matter what, I was available, and I was someone who they could text a question, ask a question, call, set a meeting for the next week. I just wanted to be that potential resource in a formal way that made them feel that, like, no matter what, they had a professional in their corner. They will always, hopefully have their parents, have their teachers, friends as mentors, etc. But like, even from like, my specific job for them is to be their mentor. And so for me, it just means a lot to be an accountability person for someone when and if they're ready for it. And if they're ready for it, I'm leaning all in. If they're not necessarily in that space right now, that's okay. My goal maybe with the mentee who was a little less engaged, maybe 10 years from now, there is a reason for her to re-engage, and there is an opportunity for her to leverage my mentorship, and vice versa. Maybe there is an opportunity for me to leverage and connect with her. Who knows what career path she will go down? Who knows where I will end up? And so there's always that sort of like structured tie and that formality to it. And that's one of the reasons I really liked it, is because I felt like, as I saw this program, I realized I lacked that. And I just thought, wow, this would have been really, really helpful had I had this. And now I want to sort of fill that gap for someone else. So even if I'm one of 15 that they may get throughout their life, hopefully that there's something that I can provide them, because I also know that they have already provided me so much. And that was something we talked about earlier, but we'll come back to, is that the perspective that a younger generation can have on something is just refreshing. And I think that it's something that alone, I think, will keep me coming back to Marquette Mentors, is just to always stay connected with that younger perspective, because I think it can be super, super valuable, in addition to hopefully all the things that I can provide them too.
Oh, certainly. I could not agree more. I think the concept of reverse mentorship, where the mentee teaches the mentor something, is incredibly valuable. Like, not only are you learning about yourself, you're learning like, okay, this person cares about this thing. So in the future, I will be more intentional about incorporating elements of that in my next mentorship, in my continued mentorship with this person. And I love what you said about that mentee who wasn't like necessarily connecting like right now, but you never know in the future, like what that person will need from you or what you will need from that person. And just having that connection is incredibly valuable. And so I really like that you called that out. That's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Learn so much from the person that you're quote, quote, supposed to be teaching. But that's what also makes it even a stronger bond, I think, too. And that's why no matter whether one day or 100 years passes, like there's that connection there and you can always reach out and vice versa. Like I feel like I could always reach out to any of my mentees at this point and that connection would still be there.
Amazing. And I'm sure that's true. And they would be lucky to have you.
As you too, for sure.
Okay, Lena, thank you so much for being here with us. This was so incredibly insightful. I loved the chat about the tech community, you building of Summerfest Tech, your journey, networking, mentorship. We've hit on some very, very important topics. And I want to close this out with one more question. It's a very important question that we ask all of our community leaders. What is your favorite thing about Milwaukee?
So it's definitely a toss-up. I work for a huge music festival. I love live music. I was just counting the other day that I have 5 concerts lined up for post Summerfest. Like that's not even Summerfest. And so there's the access to live music that we have here. I think that's something, with all the new venues coming in, there's always this conversation around, is it too many? Is it competition? No, I mean, it's just continually providing options and access to live music, which is like an integral part of what we do here. So whether they're with us this year or they're going to come back and be with us at the festival, hopefully in future years, them coming to Milwaukee is a win. And so I love live music. And I think that what we're building around that is continuing to grow and super important. But I also literally think about food 24/7. So I would also be remiss if I didn't say the food. Like that is such a big piece to what I do socially. I'm a super social person, whether it comes to like work stuff, whether it's friends, whether it's with my boyfriend, it's like, well, where are we going to go eat? So for me, it's continuing to explore the different food trucks all the way up to, your Sanfords and Birches of the ecosystem and really leaning in to everything in between to just continue to support our small business owners and the restaurateurs, which is such a hard job. I also grew up with 3 jobs in the restaurant industry, and so highly respect it. And again, love to eat. And so that's definitely, I would say, tied right there with live music. And if you can do both in one night, that's usually how it goes. And that's usually what I'm all about.
Shout out Summerfest for allowing us the opportunity to listen to music and eat at the same time. Yeah. Very important things for a Milwaukee summer.
It's a good thing I walk 30,000+ steps a day while working here so that I can indulge in all the delicious food we have and then just burn it right off.
Literally, she's gone. Festival calories don't count. We know that.
Exactly. They absolutely do not.
No. Lena, thank you so much for your time. This was absolutely fantastic. This interview will go live on Friday, let me just double check to get this in writing. Friday, May 16th. This will be in the FGPM library. Thank you so much for your perspective. We definitely appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to First Generation Professionals in Milwaukee. It's an awesome organization, one that I am excited to join and support and continue to get more involved in. And the more that I can do anything within the ecosystem that supports first generational professionals, I am here for. So thank you so much for asking me and for having me and for allowing me to chat your ear off for 45 minutes.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. And I can't wait to have you involved. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.